Welcome to the HReSource podcast, a series designed specifically for business owners and executives who want to better understand people to increase productivity and performance. My guest in the latest episode of HReSource is Amanda Thomson, CEO of Thomson & Scott. She was voted the coolest person in food and drink in 2019 by Business Insider, and they weren't wrong. She's leading the charge towards healthier lifestyles, and she's developed a groundbreaking sparkling Chardonnay, which is not only quality, it's also organic, vegan, halal, low in sugar, and non-alcoholic. No wonder they called it Noughty. She's a former BBC Arts presenter and also somebody with a passion for healthy eating, which she learned from her mother. She took that passion for food and healthy eating across the channel to Paris, where she studied at the very famous Cordon Bleu school. She left with a diploma in wine and the accolade of Entrepreneur of the Year, and also EY's winning woman. This is quite a lady. So we'd like you to enjoy our party talking about managing forward and all of that comes with managing a business in the drinks industry in 2020 in the UK that's going global. Well, I hope you'll enjoy it because I certainly enjoyed the chat. I'm delighted to welcome to the HReSource broadcast today, Amanda Thomson. Amanda, how are you today?
I'm good. All the better for this conversation. I always approach it like it might be therapy.
For both of us, maybe. For both of us. Amanda, I've been starting a lot of the broadcasts with conversations around the thing that everybody's talking about, which of course is COVID. And it's been about coping and you know how we're dealing with this terrible thing. But I'm gonna phrase it slightly differently now. How has your 2020 shaped up for you? Did you have a vision for how it was going to be? And has it, because for some people, it hasn't been too bad. For some, it's actually been a positive. And that might sound strange to people who've really suffered with this, but for some people, it's really been a positive year. So how's it been for you?
Well, I've not been swanning around, that's for sure. I have had a mixed year. I mean, COVID perhaps didn't hit me as hard as it might have done for most people, because my husband had not long had a transplant. He suffered from leukemia. So we'd been through that. And so he was on his own form of lockdown. So we had this sort of joke that now everyone else was locked down too. So I guess I was arguably better prepared than most, having to be very cautious with my social life prior to COVID, living with a husband with that very dramatically compromised immune system. From a business perspective, it's been a crazy experience. I think we've been lucky in the sense that we're in an industry where we have a huge opportunity, and we have had during the pandemic. If I take you back to March, when entrepreneurs and business people everywhere were feeling blind panic, whatever they were telling you, I guess that was a very different time, because we were selling 85% hospitality. So we were very much a real world.
Wow, yes.
We were all about the party, and I love people. I thrive off people. And so this online world is tricky for me personally. But I recognized, as the founder who's used to that wonderful word we use in entrepreneurship, pivoting. Of course, often
that's become very popular,
crash and break U-turn. So we realised that we had direct-to-consumer set up, and we had the capability, and then we needed to pay it a lot more focused attention, and also look at how we could build out off-trade, so retail essentially, and online retail. So it was a very mixed bag, but now, in speaking to you where I am in October, I think Noughty, my alcohol-free, arguably will have been made in COVID. So compared with a lot of my entrepreneur friends, I'm seeing incredible businesses go to the ground. It's utterly heartbreaking. So parking that, I would say on a personal level, Noughty, my alcohol-free, has had a huge opportunity during COVID, and we've made the most of that. So I've been chained to my Mac pretty much 7 a.m. Sometimes with all our international opportunities, 7 a.m. till 9, 10 p.m. I mean, really unhealthy hours. But I knew that the chance was there to really build it in a different way. So I've risen to the challenge, as have the team.
Well, for the benefit, I'm not just saying this, but for the benefit of people listening to this, you and I saw each other on an event the other week, last week I think it was, and you very kindly accepted my invitation to the podcast on the strength of your great introduction to your business, of which I was aware, but obviously seeing you in person, hearing you speak, it was something else. That had another dimension. But the other dimension to that, it made it a real sort of encompassing event for me, was the actual tasting of Noughty, which was fantastic. I did all the wrong things because I hadn't chilled it first. It had been sat on the windowsill, so it was, I'm saying all the wrong things. But the taste was unbelievable.
Well, I mean,
I shared
you'll
it with
probably
you,
know. You'll know that good wines, sommeliers will taste a formal wine when it's room temperature anyway. You know, there's always this joke about if you've got a bad wine, chill it to, chill it right down crazily. So I'm delighted to hear that, and particularly the fact that you tasted it warm and you hopefully got all those fruity flavours without the alcohol, 100% Chardonnay, organic, vegan, halal certified. We've got a crowd pleaser, luckily, in Noughty.
Yeah, so I've been telling everybody I know about it, which is exactly what you want. It's
absolutely
that bit of marketing for you, isn't it?
Yeah, word of mouth business is the best business of all, David.
Before I move on to the next question, how's the husband? How is he?
He's doing well. Thank you for asking. He's doing brilliantly, and not least from a business perspective. Thank goodness, because he's an awesome PR, and he comes from the world of film and TV, and I've harangued him to lead the brand, and he's done a sterling job. So thankfully, he's been very busy too, assisting with the comms side of my business, because of course I don't have to pay him his usual fee.
Do you want me to cut that bit out of the broadcast?
Yeah.
Well, listen, Amanda, you have an amazing CV, really, in terms of career path and career projection. You've been quite a high-profile broadcaster, arts broadcaster for the BBC, and then two words sort of popped out at me when looking at your resume, which is Cordon Bleu. So you've had your experience in Paris, which is quite tremendous, and aligned to that, and perhaps starting at the wrong end here, but your diet and your influences have very much been around healthy eating. Well. I think there's a reference to your mum's played an important part, as they do. Mothers are great, aren't they? But that your mother played a very important part in educating you about diet and nutrition. So I suppose there's a line there you can follow to where you are. But ultimately, how did you get to the point of taking this Noughty step? I had to get it in there. I
love that, the Noughty step. And I think you told me a while back, didn't you, that you'd had a story about your daughter on the Noughty step, who I'm assuming might be grown up now. I think you were suggesting
she's in the mid-20s, and she's she's senior journalist with the Daily Express. So
I don't know if she'd like her story publicised, but I think all parents will be familiar with the Noughty step. So my brand is NOUGHT at 0% alcohol. Yeah, it was an interesting transition. I was a champagne girl, I suppose. When I'm not paying, I would have a beautiful krug flowing through my veins. Champagne was sort of my buzz, and in the world of arts broadcasting back in the day, because I was born in the 70s, you'd be drinking whatever was handed to you on the red carpet. You'd be cutting your stories. You'd be work hard, play hard, often staying up all night. I tell my kids, and they're like, really? Obviously, we don't recommend that these days in the corporate world. But the transition to alcohol-free really was just this recognition that we all need a prop, I think, to make us feel comfortable. And I was never a smoker, and I was never a big drinker, but just that idea of the pop of the cork and that thing of the sound and that delineating aperitif time and party time and And it really got me thinking, because once I'd sort of cracked what I saw as the alcoholic world, creating the perfect champagne, creating the perfect Prosecco, so I was really comfortable in the alcohol space. But for me, the holy grail was whether it were possible to create something perfect in the alcohol-free space. And I was all about purity and palate. And, you know, there's not a lot I show off about in the wine business, but I know I've got a really, really good palate. And for me, there's no point launching anything to drink unless it tastes incredible, no matter how good your brand. And the depressing thing really about the alcohol-free landscape in the wine world was it was all pretty shocking. I'm afraid to say most of it was pretty undrinkable. I mean, we used to joke about it being like mouthwash, and we used to have all these team tastings, and I would literally buy in everything. I mean, I remember buying everything that was out there, and I really was so upset. And it was a bit like that sort of Willy Wonka thing where I was like, I know I need to create the perfect alcohol-free. I know that we need something that brings the party without the alcohol. I want the pop of a cork like champagne. I want to be able to please, you know, people who aren't drinking for all manner of reasons. And this then became a real obsession of mine. Once I started to learn about the reasons people weren't drinking, you know, such a broad church, you know, everybody who's not drinking for religious reasons, who's not drinking in the corporate world because they're pregnant but don't want to publicize it, you know, any manner of reasons. And often you may not want to share them. And that was another interesting analysis for me, this idea that us Brits are so bad for, oh, you're not drinking, David? Oh God, why aren't you drinking? You know, I mean, I think we're probably, from what I understand, the worst culture for that. This idea that, you know, we're less than, we're boring if we're not drinking. And it was really interesting to see what had been done in the alcohol-free beer space. And I'm not a beer drinker, but it was fascinating to see how much those beers had taken off across the world. And then we started to get into that alt spirits world where Seedlip had made a really big impression, and there were many more coming to market. And a lot of them were pretty good, but the wine business was really depressing on that front. And so that was really that Willy Wonka obsession for me, which was, how do I create the perfect alcohol-free that is akin to champagne, but is, you know, just zero alcohol. And again, that was the mission, because a lot of alcohol-free now, there's a sort of homogenous space that sort of stores and pubs and things are creating, which is low no. And for me, that's a bit of a misnomer, because, you know, we all know there's so much confusion anyway over what we can or can't drink if we're driving or if we're choosing not to. And it's such a confused space over understanding the science of alcohol anyway, that I was like, I need my bottle to be entirely alcohol-free, zero, so not even trace.
I'm with you 100% on that one. Talking about percentages, 100% in agreement, because
right. I mean, what's the point of being low? I'm like, well, if I want to make a spritzer, I'll take a decent white wine and add some sparkling water. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you talked and you touched on there all of the pressures that people find themselves socially. It could be commercially, so it could be at work that you find yourself under pressure. But I had my stint as an interim COO at 1 Year No Beer, and I started their 90-day challenge. And I think I was on day 2, and I was actually back home because I was up in Scotland for the duration of the role, but I was back home for a break. And it was day 2, and I went to a 40th birthday party. I'd started to count after the first couple, 8 demands that I drink because I was at a 40th birthday party. Now, and they could not understand why I wasn't drinking, apart from the fact I was driving, which is, oh, you can have one, or you can, you know, and it's almost as if you're not enjoying yourself unless you're having alcohol. And that really was, I mean, ordinarily I probably would have caved after the first couple and just thought, oh no, I'll play along. It's pretty easier to do that. And then I can say I've had one and I'm driving, whatever. But the fact that word got around that this is a guy that's not drinking to us quite.
And of course, it's almost like people, when they know you're not, it then becomes a goading thing, doesn't it? It's a bit like, I suppose, when people are on special diets and they publicize it, it's like people start to nudge you on it. And I think, I mean, I don't want to create gender stereotypes, but I do see men particularly getting a lot of pressure, possibly even more pressure when they're in groups, you know. And I think that we've got to really get away from that. But what it was about for me was not being preachy, because I think that, you know, just because you're not drinking, it doesn't need to feel less than. And also, does it even need to be a conversation? And that's where I wanted Noughty to be able to ameliorate those social situations, whether it be a corporate event or, you know, whatever event it is. And of course, celebrate the fact that you're drinking Noughty if you want to, but equally, you know, you can have a seat at the table with a glass of what looks like champagne or Prosecco, and it's not supposed to be any sort of invisible cloak, but it is a lovely idea. I've spoken to some law students at an event, and it's like they can have a glass of fizz, and it doesn't automatically sort of draw the eye to the fact that they're not drinking. And I think that that's really important, particularly for younger people starting work, because that, I've discovered, in the corporate world can create huge pressures on people too.
Just looking at the product specifically, I'm fascinated by this. Can you sort of walk me through the ingredients and the sourcing of the ingredients and how you build this amazing taste, and looking at Noughty in particular?
So it's really like creating a perfect wine, but there's a de-alcoholization process. I mean, as is done through a process called vacuum distillation. So it's really about retaining the flavor, but not having any alcohol. Now, I think there's a number of reasons why it's very difficult to make one tasting this good. And my maker, I've always looked on the wine business and now the alcohol-free business. I sort of took inspiration from the fashion world and the worlds of diffusion. And there's so many incredible artisan, beautiful, passionate, brilliant winemakers out there who don't necessarily get the cut through in the global marketplace because of the focus on brand.
Yeah.
And so my maker, actually, his great-great-great-grandfather, I'm not sure how many years back, was the original patent holder for this de-alcoholization process. So
wow.
He's been in the business, this German maker, for a very long time historically. And so I guess had honed the skills over the years. But to take it a step further for me with Noughty, it was about being 100% organic and about really cutting sugar. And ours is the lowest sugar level, I think it's fair to say, on the global market, because a lot of the alcohol-frees, I think what they do is they probably use sugar to compensate for the lack of weight in alcohol and to try and recreate some extra flavor. So the challenge is to create the perfect balance, because for me, the perfect wine or alcohol-free is all about balance,
yeah.
but without using a ton of sugar to supplement it and to try and mask the imperfection, which is what happens in conventional wine.
And how long did it take you to sort of arrive at this Eureka moment where Noughty was?
Well, it was a long time, and eventually we came across the maker at Pro Wine, which is probably the world's most famous sort of commercial wine market, where every single winemaker across the globe usually is there. And if they don't have a stand and can't afford that, they're usually there wandering around and doing their research. And I really loved the quality of what my maker was doing. But that was really the start of the journey of saying, I'm loving the quality of what you're doing, but can you make an alcohol-free to my specification? So, you know, to sort of please my palate with all of those tick boxes I mentioned, with the vegan aspect, the organic aspect, the halal aspect, and then really finding the right grapes, being organic from Spain in the end we chose, and then making sure that the sugar level was correct and the balance was perfect. So it's really like creating any perfect recipe, actually. And of course, what often happens, I think, with substandard, cheaper products that haven't been created with love and care and passion is you'll miss one ingredient out and then it will just be off kilter. You know, so that I think it's really the same with winemaking.
Yeah, and in terms of the market for you, because you've mentioned the fact previously about the hospitality trade and how important that has been to your business. Are you working with corporates, with partnerships to develop your reach for your brand?
Yeah, we've got some great partners. EY is probably earliest and most established one in the corporate world, and they've been fantastic to us as a brand, and I won an entrepreneur prize with them, so you end up being part of their evergreen alumni, which I think is a really exciting opportunity. They actually helped me with the B Corp process, because that's a long, old, complex process, particularly for a smaller brand like mine, and we ended up getting our B Corp certification.
Is this the approval for your product?
Yeah, well, for our business. So we managed to get Thomson Scott B Corp approved. So there's only, I want to say 3,000, I think just over 3,000 businesses. Is that in the UK? There's hardly any businesses. It's a really small amount. I need to check my numbers there. But Patagonia was originally, I suppose, the most famous one. It started in America, and it was about this idea that you will do everything ethically in your business where possible. So it's that idea that's super fashionable now of profit with purpose. But of course, well, everybody's, all the corporates are realizing they've got to focus on that now. But it was really about doing the right thing when no one was looking. And we've now got written in our share articles that we won't just be chasing the commercial profit. The bottom line will also be approaching business from an ethical stance, which, it's no mean feat to get investors to sign up for that.
Yeah, I mean, that to me is, there's nothing wrong with investors and people and other marks, and fair trade obviously is another one in the food and drink industry that's up there. But clearly this is aimed at the whole structure.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, they have I think Jamie Oliver said recently, they have a rummage around in your underwear drawer. They literally metaphorically do. I mean, every bit of paperwork is assessed, every process, even as a small, fast growth business like ours, or in a startup, you end up having to create a process that you didn't know you needed a process for. I mean, it's a really brilliantly thorough exercise, which of course is the reason why so few businesses are certified, and importantly, it means a lot to have the certification.
Do you think this is an interesting one? I've come across this before, but with that particular accreditation, do you think it needs marketing? Do you think it needs to be promoted more so people realise that the pain that you go through to achieve it?
I think that it is fairly well marketed. I mean, I know it's massive in the US, where we do a lot of business now. And I know amongst the corporates, it's well known. I mean, we're just about to launch with Waitrose, and Waitrose have a special B Corp brand certified section in their online store. So I think it is becoming more and more well known. But I think the fact that you're suggesting that perhaps it isn't as well known as it might be, I guess means yes.
I think maybe amongst the SME community, maybe the higher, the sort of blue chip corporate world, it's something that's acknowledged and accepted, and I'm aware of it. But I think you're the first business that I've spoken to on the podcast that's been aware of it or been involved directly with it. And I'm trying to recall businesses that I've had dealings with who've actively pursued it as well. So coming from, again, my experience in the legal world, there was Lexcel accreditations and all sorts of things that helped you. And there was always an argument about how well do people know about it? Do clients really understand what that is when they're coming through your doors? They understand that you've gone through that pain barrier, and they don't know. And maybe in the corporate world, it's known, but if you're looking to a broader audience beyond that, and if you're looking to, I don't know, is Noughty going to find itself on the shelves of the supermarkets?
So Waitrose we're going into. Actually, I was just thinking, I got approached by a VC the other day, and their funds were purely focused on B Corp businesses. Wow. So I guess it is slowly but surely being recognised.
Yeah. And you were saying that you're on the shelves of Waitrose.
We're just about to launch with them any day now.
That's brilliant news. That's excellent. Looking at I suppose the pandemic, I don't obsess about it, but it is what a lot of people are talking about a lot of the time. But did you find that it affected, you touched a bit on Noughty sort of exploding a little bit in 2020 as a result of this. Do you think it's really changed our behaviours in a healthier way, or do you think there's been an unhealthy element to what's happened with COVID?
I think we have to,
other than the obvious,
don't we, talk about the chasm, and I think it's all very well if we're able to work from home, in no matter how much it might drive us mad. I think we're very blessed, aren't we? I think for anyone who's not in a stable financial situation, I'm imagining that it must be an even more unhealthy time. And so I think whenever I am complaining about my life, I always remind myself how blessed I am, because I always think about and remind my kids, actually, my 12-year-old son, and say, yeah, I know, Mommy, I think if I was stuck in a tower block and struggling to feed my children, and, so I think it's always very important. It's been an important part of my psyche, actually, to always try and be relative about things. So I think that's a long answer to your question, but I think probably amongst middle classes, then yes, we're probably, a lot of us, getting healthier because we can afford to. But I think for a lot of people, the opposite. And I think that's something that we can't ignore or underestimate. I mean, just looking at what Rashford's doing for, pushing free school meals. And I just think there's, the chasm between rich and poor in this country is a huge concern of mine. So I think probably we're all doing okay, but I think a lot of people really aren't.
I think there is, on the upside, people have taken the opportunity, if they've been able to, but they've taken an opportunity to look at their lives and actually think, I'm not happy with this. And I suppose that's made a lot of divorce lawyers very happy, because they've realised, actually, this isn't a relationship for me.
We're not meant to be stuck in with our partners 24/7.
Yeah, that's a real test, isn't it?
Yeah.
But on the other side as well is the health aspect, and wanting to get rid of that spare tire and or be fitter generally.
I think you're completely right. For my brand, if I'm speaking about my business and my brand, then no question, the answer is yes. I just didn't want to be that person who ignored the dark side of what's going on in this country.
No. It's there.
For my business, absolutely, of course. I mean, I'm part of that health and wellness trend, which is growing massively. And of course, everyone's starting to realise now they have to offer something delicious and alcohol-free. They have to create a welcome space for their Muslim clients. They have to, we've got all the tick boxes. So yeah, from a personal business perspective, I think the pandemic has been hugely helpful for Noughty's growth and trajectory. I mean, at the moment, my phone and my sales director, every day a new territory, literally. We get inquiries all around the world.
Wow.
So personally, I can't complain, I guess we were perfectly poised for that upswing, absolutely. Although it was kind of shocking when I looked at the reality between our perception of us getting healthier during the pandemic, even the middle classes, because actually, apparently, more and more of us have put on weight, if you look at the stats. So I think there's, the higher echelons probably on their Pelotons, eating great food and enjoying life. And, I think in other corners, not so much, sadly.
Yeah, and it's still a challenge that we're going to have to tackle. I mean, looking at the timelines and social media, people who are talking about, and it's sort of semi-jokey, but also there's an element of truth in it. People that are sort of having their breakfast with a glass of wine or something. Well, I haven't got to go into work, so it doesn't really matter. And I look at that, and I'm taken back to the time that I had with one yellow beer, and I've become quite an advocate of the healthy. So I'm doing Stoptober at the moment, but I'm in your camp that I would quite like a drink. It's just, but my appetite for alcohol, having given it up for the 90 days, which is a reasonably significant period, I don't think I'm going to go back to where I was. And I wasn't a heavy drinker, but it was sufficient to see the uptick with not drinking. And for me, a lot of it revolved around like a fog lifting and a clarity of thought and productivity and dare I say, an element of a sense of humour coming back. Some may argue about that one. But the reality is you almost become a bit of a nicer person because you're a bit more comfortable in your own skin. And that doesn't get talked about very much, but it is a reality. And I know that there are a lot of people who would think giving up drink is just anathema. It's not something they could ever, contemplate. But all I would say is give it a try, because I think for a longer, healthier life, it's got to be a way to consider, and that's why products.
I think that reset's really interesting, isn't it? I think I don't have an addictive personality, luckily, and touch wood, I've got this far, so I'm assuming it won't come now. And so I love a glass of something delicious, but I've never been one of these people, and I've got them. I know many of them, and I know that idea. I do believe in the addictive gene, absolutely. And I think either way, a reset is so interesting. And I remember speaking to Richard Piper, the CEO of Alcohol Change, about that idea of that reset and how, you know, it's a bit like anything, a bit like giving up sugar. If you give it up for even a short amount of time, your palate will recalibrate, won't it? And so I guess, you know, even if people don't feel like that idea that they can sign up for too long a period, just a short reset can really change the way you look at something. I think at the beginning of our conversation, we were talking about that crutch idea, weren't we? And, you know, people historically used to use it with cigarettes, didn't they? And then it was a glass of something. And I think that takes me back to that idea of us having something delicious in a glass as a crutch. That, you know, I loved my European sort of delineation of aperitif time, and that idea that you can have something that you're looking forward to at 6 o'clock or whatever time that isn't alcohol, but something that's still delicious and you're looking forward to. And I think it's about still finding those moments in your life, so it doesn't just feel like you're losing something without replacing it with anything else lovely.
I've got a little something I prepared. You know, Blue Peter. You were born in the 70s. You definitely remember.
Yes.
So I've got my little what I call my WeWork, which sounds a bit dodgy, but it's actually that working in WeWork. Anybody who has done, they've got those big, or they had those huge containers where they used to put a lot of cucumber and fresh fruits, oranges.
Sadly too expensive, all of that, because it must be the fruit that's caused them the problems.
That's probably
sadly.
What do you know, beer? We're in a WeWork office arrangement for a little while, and I think the one thing I took away from that was, God, that's tasty. So
nice.
There are things you can do. I know it's not sparkling, and I know it's not normal.
I think you've secretly got vodka in there, David, but I won't tell anyone.
Honestly not, but I'm going to answer it. It's nice and tasty. Just thinking about what we've been talking about generally, about the environment you're in right now, the number of markets, which is super exciting. The fact that your business is now expanding globally and you're trying to keep up with the pace of all this is fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. But with all of that going on, and your superbly talented husband on communications there is obviously working this magic.
He's got his own business as well, so.
Oh, wow. Multitasking, you see, we can do it. But the reality is, there's been so much news about, you know, you can't turn on the news. The 10 o'clock news will be pretty much nose to tail COVID. You know, you're not going to get much else breaking through. So in that news round, in that social media chain of everything to do with COVID, how have you broken through? How's your message cut through? How do you think it's managed that?
Well, I think we'd always used PR as our form of communication. We'd never done paid advertising or marketing. We've been a very unusual brand to have done that. And actually my business partner grew Camden Beer in a very similar way. So we don't do paid advertising, marketing, anything like that. So we've really built our brand on the story. And right. I think there are so many touch points to the story. Plus, women sadly don't create global drinks brands as often as I'd like them to. And so being a female entrepreneur who has got a voice, you know, gives me a certain sort of leadership opportunity. So when there's a microphone, I'm always happy to take it to inspire the next generation, you know, above everything else, really. But so I think the media have noticed us really from early days because we're doing something different and innovative, and it's not very normal, actually. I mean, there's a few more women in the drinks business now, I'm delighted to say, but pretty much you count them on one hand, probably. And so with all of our pillars as well, with coming from champagne, moving into Prosecco, and then alcohol-free, we've just been able to make enough noise online that's ended up going viral, and then ended up having editors notice us, and then having the editors call us and say, would I like to be on Radio 5 Live or whatever. So I think that what people don't realise is there are so many eyeballs online at the moment, whether we like it or not. And I think so many brands are so used to having to pay for everything that they don't realise that so much media is free now. I mean, people have been so kind and said to me, "Oh, I love all your media, Amanda. Who's doing it?" And yeah, my husband's a great publicist, but equally, I've just always just got on and done stuff. I think the New Yorkers call it scrappy style. You just get on and you share your story. You know, you just get on with it. And of course, you know, if you look at the way Gary Vaynerchuk in the US, he's probably the most famous person for sharing stories and just getting on and doing stuff. And I think, particularly us Brits, we're not always so comfortable doing that, are we? It's not really so hardwired in our DNA. And I guess having been a journalist, there's not a lot that phases me, and there's not a lot that's going to really throw me off. And so I just get on and do it. And if there's a media opportunity, the only one I recently turned down actually was I turned down a national newspaper because the story it turned out, we had a really nice interview, and then I just want to clarify what the top line of this story is. And the journalist said to me, "Oh, it's businesses that might not survive the pandemic."
Oh, okay, thanks. I'll get the code.
Well, that wasn't made super clear. I'm 100% surviving the pandemic, and I'm in a really fortuitous position where we're growing. I said, "So thank you very much, but please don't include me." You know, wow. so you know, I suppose it's that.
That's a journalistic experience right there, asking that question.
Is all news going to be good news? Yeah. No, you know, so you got to make sure you do your checks and balances, right?
That's brilliant. I mean, the fact that you're a woman leading a business per se, generally, when you look at the demographics, unusual. When you're a woman leading a business that's innovating, that's creating a new product, again, that's unusual. But in this particular industry, it is tough. So I think it's full credit to you for achieving that. I mean,
Thank you. I think, you know, whatever your gender is tough. I think where being a woman's been fortuitous is that I get remembered and noticed. So I've spent my life in the wine industry, not so much now because I've established myself, but for a long time, I was patronized every which way. And I used to laugh and say to young entrepreneurs, I said, look, if you get used to being patronized, obviously it's a bit ugly and silly, but it gives you that space. So there was a really long time when everyone was like, "Oh, Amanda's doing her little thing. She's creating her little kitchen table business," you know. And it was like all the while I was really building a global brand quietly without anyone noticing me. And I think that don't underestimate that. I think a lot of people's egos get in the way, and they can't recognize that, you know, if someone's patronizing you, you've got a whole lot of space to go on and rule that world that you're trying to rule. So I just think,
radar and then up to the top.
Absolutely. And so you know, on a positive, there's not many women in the business. I get remembered. So that actually can be helpful too. So I think it depends which way you look at it.
If my memory serves me, and I'm getting a bit old now, so I might be a bit out of it, but if you mentioned, I think in the conversation last week, that the business was founded 2016?
Yeah, so 2016 was when we sort of launched our portfolio. We're in a slightly strange position because it's arguably year one of our alcohol-free. So it's a slightly interesting reset. So we've got our numbers, and then we're almost looking now at this incredible growth trajectory of alcohol-free, which is kind of where we're going out front leading. So yes, 2016 was sort of the Thomson Scott portfolio. The past year to date is, I suppose, the alcohol-free phase 2 of the business.
But just stealing a little bit of thunder about what I was going to say next, but you can either say, well, no, we're not going to do that, or maybe that's an idea. 2021 makes that 5 years. Is that something you want to mark with?
Well, now you've told me, because entrepreneurs, I'm sure you know, we're all terrible at celebrating the small stuff and all the big stuff, actually, because I'm always on to the next thing. And I think it's very important for the team, actually, to mark those things. So I feel like if we're allowed a party, we should have one. And I think most of us are going to be desperate to have a party whenever we're allowed for all manner of reasons. So
you've got something to celebrate with, haven't you?
Know that. I want a party whenever I'm allowed. Absolutely. Gosh, that sounds like a lovely idea.
What of looking at the round now of your career, and I'm getting a sense of where the answer might be, but it might surprise me. What projects have you worked on that have given you the greatest buzz?
So last year was that I get very thrown on dates now, because of course it's a bit like the pandemic's like dog years, isn't it? And we're all muddled over times being bent in different ways. We had the EY Entrepreneur of the Year, which is a huge event, and of course it's massive in America and it's getting really big here. And I was absolutely honoured, not only to be poured at the ceremony, and that was with Prosecco and Noughty that had just launched, but also asked to speak. So that was a huge moment amongst incredible entrepreneurs, and a really interesting focus on the purpose piece, which EY has been brilliant at with their entrepreneurial group, and really just driving home that message. And there were some incredible entrepreneurs there. And this whole evergreen alumni situation means that you've got a seat at the table no matter what. And so that was a real honour for me to be part of that. And for me, anywhere where there's a really good party, you sense a theme now. You see, I've missed parties so much. We had a crazy party, so that was really the icing on the cake. So that was probably my most recent memorable moment in the real world.
Exactly, something to really celebrate. And if you want to look at something whereby, on your career to date, a piece of advice that you were given that you think might be helpful to share on with others, can you think of that?
Life is short. Get on with it. I mean, unless you're religious, we've got one shot at this, haven't we? So I think we've got to make it count. And I guess I was acutely struck by that with the experience of my husband, who nearly died. There's no sort of polite way of putting that. And so that was brought sharply into the spotlight. Although the irony of my personality is I've always been one to enjoy a moment. And I think that takes me right back to why it's been a lovely, lovely conversation with you. But I would much rather we were, in a bar together talking. And I think that we've got an opportunity now, and I think any sort of budding entrepreneurs or people who do want to try and change their life, as you say, I think there's no time like the present. And I think that putting one foot in front of another makes any task achievable. And I think we spend so much time, don't we, all of us, pontificating, and we've all got so many pressures on us, whatever our situation in life, and we never know anybody else's story. And I think that's also important to remember. But for me, my growth is all about putting one foot in front of the other. And then even when you're pushed down or pushed back 100 steps, you keep going forward. And I guess that goes back to that point about all of my favourite entrepreneurs. We're never good at really celebrating because we're always on to the next thing. So I guess for me, I want to really try and enjoy each moment a little bit more when there's something to celebrate. That's a lot of advice rolled into a few. Not very pithy. Sorry, David.
It's gold dust. It's absolutely priceless, really. So that sort of thing. I mean, everybody says life is short, but putting it into the context of if you're an entrepreneur or budding entrepreneur and you've got an idea and it's burning inside you, well, that idea might be depleted over time.
People have to start. I think we're all afraid to start. Yeah. And the only difference really between success and failure, if the idea is a good one, is starting and continuing, actually. I mean, really, that's what it boils down to, isn't it? And we're mostly afraid to start, I think.
Yeah. And do you find in your business now, you've got Noughty, which is a fabulously exciting project moving forward, and you've strands of that you'll look to develop as well with other similar brands as well. But do you have another idea? Is something percolating in Amanda's mind right now, thinking, do you know what? I'm actually starting to think about this. And
we've got different strands that'll launch as part of that portfolio. So we've got various things that will come to market linked to Noughty in 2021. I've been approached to ask if I'd like to do some other alcohol-free projects, so that might be also something interesting. And I did have a joke with one of my partners today. We're not really close to an exit yet, but I'm always looking as to when my dramatic, ambitious exit will be, because I have got another business I'd like to start. So I'm assuming now I will be ending up one of those serial entrepreneurs, because I think there is an opportunity to really change the world and make it a better place, to use that sort of cliche that a lot of entrepreneurs use but often feel. So I really want to get on and do that.
You must be one of the smiliest disruptors I've had the pleasure to meet.
So I tell you something, I was terrible at hard news. So I was really early days pushed towards hard news at the BBC. And it was really not a travesty that I didn't go that route, because I'm way too animated. I smile too much, my eyes are too big, and I get too excited. So no, that's how I ended up in the arts space, and that's how I was handed a glass of champagne in my hand.
Amanda, it's been wonderful talking to you. I'm sure the listeners are going to get a great deal from this broadcast. I know I have. And good luck with everything that's going Noughty. The Noughty step, little story with my daughter, which I did promise you.
Are you allowed to share? Is she all right with it?
Blow it. See, when you hear the story, you'll realise why I'm telling it. It actually bounces back on me, not her. She aged, I think, about 4, certainly not much older than 4, in a previous house with the common garden step. She'd been naughty. I couldn't even tell you what it is now, but we had the Noughty step idea, and it worked a treat. It had been working fabulously, but I think she was getting to the stage now where she just about waded up, and I'd got her on the bottom step, on the step, and I'd left her for a little while just to percolate, as you do. Just think about that, and Daddy will walk away, and then he'll come back. And I came back to her, and I was starting the conversation. What do you think you're doing here? What was it that you did that you think brought you to the bottom step? And I could see that she was just had a faraway look. And I said, are you listening to me? And she said, no, Daddy. I said, why? What are you doing? She said, I'm looking at the housetops over there, because you could see straight through from the bottom stairs over to the kitchen. I said, well, why are you doing that? They're far more interesting than you, Daddy. Burned.
We could always rely on our kids.
I knew that was me gone.
Can't we? We could always rely on them when we're really feeling good. We can always rely on them chopping us down. There you go. That's why we love them.
Never get too big for your boots. Definitely grounded. I've got 3 treasures. They're absolutely fabulous. Absolutely, each one of them. But thank you very much.
No, it was a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me. We
shall have to do something like this again when you're on to the next project and the next project again. Thank you very much, Amanda.
Thanks, David. Real pleasure. Take care.
Thank you.